Here we are in Chapter 9. In Chapter 9, we're going to be looking specifically at cognitive and behavioral strategies that are intended to improve exercise performance. You should be able to explain the differences between strategies, interventions, and programs, and then become familiar with the different types of cognitive and behavioral strategies and programs, again, in order to improve exercise performance. So the goal for this chapter is to review the different evidence-based cognitive, which deals with our thought processes, our mental skills, as well as our behavioral, our actions, and to look at those strategies, also to consider interventions and programs that have, again, been shown to favorably influence a person's motivation, their emotions, their thoughts, and performance. Ultimately, our goal is to use these cognitive and behavioral strategies to improve and enhance exercise performance. When we use the word intervention, think of intervention as being an all-inclusive global type of concept. An intervention would include all different types of strategies and treatments and skill programs that would improve performance. And so consultants attempt to put together an intervention from various resources in order to help their client. And again, these treatments and programs would be used over a period of time and would be possibly in several different forms of treatment. So again, intervention would be your all-encompassing concept as it deals with different strategies, treatments, and programs. Whereas sometimes treatment and intervention are used interchangeably, make note that we are not talking about the same thing. The treatment is more specific. It's a specific procedure or action, and it's intended to elicit a predictable outcome. So, whereas an intervention is broader, a treatment is that specific action or program. For instance, it might consist of using coping strategies as we're dealing with stress. That would be a treatment. And then defining a specific strategy, again, you can have cognitive strategies or behavioral strategies, but strategies are basically very specific. It's dealing with self-initiated process. It's designed for a specific outcome to achieve a specific goal. So again, you have your broad term intervention, that's your global overview. Then you have a specific treatment, and then finally a specific strategy, and strategies can be either cognitive or behavioral. A cognitive strategy would deal with a person's thought processes, and obviously a behavioral one would deal with their actions, actual performance. Chapter 9 provides several examples of cognitive strategies that could be used within an exercise setting. Again, we're not going to talk to each one of these, but I encourage you to go to the textbook and read the section on each one of these cognitive strategies that can be used within an exercise setting. You have probably used some of these cognitive strategies in your own exercise behaviors. Things that would include positive self-talk, relaxation, psyching up, mental imagery, visualization, bizarre imagery, which is an interesting one, thought stopping, association or dissociation, mental toughness, mindfulness, which is kind of a new concept that's being used with cognitive strategies, and causal attributions. And then the textbook also describes several behavioral strategies that can be used in exercise settings. Behavioral strategies that would include individual coaching, mental health services, providing educational materials, club organizations, social support, use of modeling, environmental features, physical location, music, pedometers, and accelerometers. Again, all these would be examples of behavioral strategies, and I encourage you to go to the textbook, chapter 9, and read these in more detail. And again, I'm sure that you have used some of these behavioral strategies in your own exercise performance. Moving on in chapter 9, we look at specific programs and interventions. And motivational interviewing is an intervention framework, and it's received increased attention in recent years in changing health behavior. It's a client-centered approach, and it hopes to improve the intrinsic motivation. And there are 3 essential functions. And these 3 would include, first of all, sitting down and collaborating with a client, and you want to create this supportive, non-judgmental environment to kind of set the stage to help the client initiate their own behavior change. Number 2, you want to explore with the client reasons for and against behavior change, maybe a cost analysis sheet. But again, you want to resolve any ambivalence the client might have. And finally, the idea that the client has a sense of autonomy, a responsibility for changing behavior. Ultimately, if there's going to be a change of behavior, it's up to them. So the client decides if, how, and when change will occur as relates to exercise behavior. This intervention approach basically gives ownership completely onto the client, and it provides them with a sense of accountability, responsibility, that it's up to them if change is going to happen. Another intervention model that's in chapter 9 is called the disconnected values model, DVM. And this is where basically you help the client, first of all, acknowledge their negative or unhealthy habits. As well, you want to help the client identify their deepest core values, what is really important to them. And then from the unhealthy habits that they have acknowledged, along with their deepest core values they've identified, you're going to show the misalignment or the disconnection between the unhealthy habits and the values they say they believe in. An example here would be someone who says they have high value on their family, and family is very, very important to them. And yet they're being engaged in a lot of unhealthy habits that basically would shorten their lifespan and would then have detrimental effects on their family. So there's a real disconnect there. So as they see this disconnect, you would have your client respond to the costs and the consequences of this connection. The disconnection that's there, what's it costing them, and what are the consequences if they continue in this disconnected behavior? And comparing that with the benefits of not allowing that disconnection to continue. And then developing an action plan so that the client can replace unhealthy habits with new healthy behaviors, which then will help get rid of the disconnection between what they say they value and the health habits they actually practice. Moving along then to chapter 10. In this chapter, we're going to look specifically at how do you goal set. So goal setting as relates to exercise performance and adherence. And also we'll talk a little bit about providing leadership in the exercise setting. I'm guessing this isn't the first time you've heard about goal setting, and then specifically, how does goal setting help one in improving their health behavior? Well, obviously, goal setting provides motivation. It also helps to just focus the performer's effort. It also helps us monitor progress and successes. There are different ways that we can look at setting effective goals. One deals with the direction and the quality of behavior. And so when we talk about the direction, we're basically talking about the person's focuses on their particular behavior for a particular outcome. And the amount or quality of behavior then indicates what's the minimum standard of performance that is acceptable. So goals do have values in motivating people to take action. And this can be very powerful. So, example of a goal that would have both direction and amount would be a statement like, I will use a drop shot in tennis when I'm near the net and my opponent is near the baseline. So that has both the direction, the specific behavior, as well as what's the standard necessary for success. When we talk about goals, it's important to also talk about personality. And why is it that some of us need goals more than others? Well, it's basically because each of us have our own goal orientation. And that basically is related to our need and preference for goals, the need and preference we have for setting goals, and also the effectiveness of goal setting on that person's motivation and thus the performance level. Someone who has a high need for achievement, a high need achievement goal orientation would like goals. They would be very motivated by setting goals up. They want to be pushed. They want to see how well they can compete, how much they can achieve. And using goals is a great way to meet those high need achievers. However, not everybody is motivated by the need to achieve. So it's very important for healthcare professionals to know their client and know what is it that motivates them and what their goal orientation would be. As we talk about goals, it's also important to make a distinction between what we call performance versus outcome goals. With a performance goal, the success is defined in terms of some internal standard. It's a function of comparing where you are now to where you have been. In this idea, the process of achieving goals is more important than the final product. On the other hand, when we talk about outcome goals, we're basically talking about viewing one's competence. And so outcome goals deal more directly with the final product or with the outcome. The example is, I want to win the race. Well, that outcome goal I may or may not have control with, right? I want to win the race. I'm going to win this race. That's my goal. But let's say I'm in a field of runners that just have to be very, very good. Well, I don't have control about that. Whereas I do have control about how I train or the process. So a process goal might state, I will complete 60 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 days a week. That's something I have direct control over. Whereas whether or not I'm going to win a race is dependent on a lot of external things that I may not have much control over. So obviously, performance goals are better than outcome goals. So as we work at developing goals within the exercise setting, here are just some good guidelines. First of all, make sure your goal is observable and measurable. Make sure that it's challenging but realistic. Make sure it's specific. And so as I write a goal, I want to make sure I can measure it. That's something I can see. I want to make sure it's challenging but realistic. And the more specific the goal, the easier it is to see if I've accomplished it. It's better to have the exerciser set their own goals rather than you setting goals for them. Again, performance, not outcome. There may be times where, depending on the type of exerciser you're working with, you may also include outcome, but don't forget those performance type goals. And obviously short term, the right here, right now, what can I accomplish today? What can I accomplish this week? As well as long term, 3 months from now. So those are all good exercise guidelines as far as how to establish goals. Here are some sample fitness goals I think that follow these guidelines. First, I will briskly walk 20 minutes during my lunch hour at least 3 days per week. Again, something that's measurable, something that's very specific, and probably something that is very achievable. Another example, I will complete 3 strength training sessions on alternate days during the week. Each session will consist of 5 strength exercising using different muscle groups. Each exercise will include 2 sets of 8 repetitions. Although that's a rather long fitness goal, it is very manageable. It's very measurable to see whether or not I can complete that. And another example will be, I will complete 5 static stretches, each stretch for a different muscle group. So again, just some examples of fitness goals. And as we finish up this chapter, we just look at the idea of fitness leadership. No, fitness leadership is an art as well as a science. And so as on the art side, as a fitness leader, you need to have effective communication skills and have a good intuitive sense with how to deal with a variety of people. You should be able to convey sincere feelings towards participants and also be able to demonstrate compassion and sensitivity to others. Again, those would be more the artistic side of leadership within the fitness realm. And then fitness leadership as a science, basically you want to have good pedagogical teaching skills as you're teaching aspects of fitness to your people. Obviously, you yourself should possess a high fitness level, and you should just have good extensive knowledge of fitness principles and movement techniques because you are the expert as it deals with fitness. So both are needed, the artistic side of fitness leadership as well as the science side of fitness leadership. The textbook then goes on and gives you several examples, qualities, characteristics of health professional fitness leaders, health professionals we call it. Make sure you look through that in the chapter 10. But when we talk about being a professional, it's the idea that a person is going to have the behavior and characteristics that they've been trained, they're skilled, they know what they're doing. They're going to be receiving financial compensation as they demonstrate those skills and meet expectations. And so within the fitness community, there's that expectation for fitness leaders to be able to demonstrate professionalism. Unfortunately, sometimes that may or may not be true because often people who are tagged as fitness leaders may not have the characteristics and the qualities of what it does mean to be a professional. Here are a few professional organizations that actually do provide certification for fitness leaders and helping them to obtain the proper credentials. The American Fitness Association, the American College of Sports Medicine, the American Council on Exercise, and the American Sports and Fitness Association. So I encourage you to look through those websites and see what it takes to be considered a fitness leader